We're going to bring up the other panelists for this chat. We have Ralph Izzo. Ralph, you could join us on the stage. And we have Thomas Kuhn. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you.
All right, and Julia, I will turn things back over to you.
Thank you. Well, these two gentlemen need no introduction, I am sure. They are icons in the industry, and I'm very honored to be sitting up here with both of you, so thank you for joining me. But we have Ralph Izzo. Ralph is the chairman and CEO of PSEG, and Tom Kuhn, who is the president and CEO of the Edison Electric Institute, which is the trade association for the investor-owned utility segment of the industry. So we're going to get started just by asking each of them to make a few opening remarks, 2 minutes or so, just so people understand the perspective that you bring to this conversation about the customer.
Well, thank you. And I thank Jason and Christina and Aaron. Even though you mispronounced my name, you know, it's a 4-letter word, and my teachers have all mispronounced it from the beginning. But I thank you all. It's great to be here, and certainly with Julia, who's, I think, one of the most smartest and most innovative, creative people in this industry. I really want to complain first about the unlevel playing field. We all talk about level playing fields. We have a situation here where Ralph's first job was with the Princeton Physics Plasma Laboratory. And
I'm not one of the smartest people in the industry. I'm sitting next to this
guy. He
guy.
really could have been an astronaut like all you wanted to be. He could have been there. And the last time I was introduced, somebody said, "Here's the dope from Washington." But in any case, I represent Edison Electric Institute, electric utilities around the country and indeed around the world. We, in the United States, support 7 million jobs. That's 5% of the jobs in this country. We represent 5% of the GDP, and I often say it's the first 5%, because without electricity, you haven't got anything, any economy. And when you mention digital, it's electricity, so we ought to know something about it, and we make it happen. And I think we are making it happen in this industry. We are right now in Orlando having our National Accounts Workshop. Twice a year, we get together the 700 largest customers of the utility industry, and we talk to them and listen to them, and they talk to each other and learn a lot about how they can get served better. They are our customers. We have obviously millions of customers around the country, but we focus on that along with getting to know all our customers a lot better. I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be in our industry. We got together, our executive committee, Ralph's on it, a little while ago, and we asked them, where do you think this industry is going to be? Not in the next quarter. He represents stockholders. You got to report to them. Not in the next year, but 15 years down the road. And really, they all came together and unanimously agreed that it's going to be a cleaner energy, a more modernized grid, and advanced customer solutions. And since we're here to talk about the customers, that's the key part of the equation.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Mel?
Thanks, Julie. So thanks to the ETS organization for the invitation. It's great to be here with you, Julie, and with you, Tom. And Tom is far too modest. Without him, I don't know where our industry would be in terms of galvanizing our voice on policy matters in Washington, and the great work you've done at SEPA over the years, Julie. So for the benefit of those of you who don't know, Public Service Enterprise Group, PSEG, the parent company of PSEG, Public Service Electric and Gas. We're the largest utility in New Jersey. We're a combination electric and gas utility, obviously, by that very nature of our name. And the vision we like to paint of the future that we believe we are charged by our customers to bring about is characterized by 3 features. Feature number 1 is for people to be able to do the things that energy, specifically electricity, enables them to do while using the least amount of it. And the absurd little test I do with audiences, typically I won't do it here, is how many people woke up this morning saying, I can't wait to use a kilowatt hour. And not too many folks raise their hands. I don't wake up in the morning saying I can't wait to use a kilowatt hour, and I live in our service territory. Now, we may wake up and want to see the March Madness, or we may want to host Jack and Jill for dinner and make sure the house is comfortable for Jack and Jill to join us. So we're interested in the things that electricity and natural gas enable us to do without necessarily being too enthusiastic about the quantity of electricity and natural gas that needs to be consumed. So that really is a long-winded way to summarize 2 words, and that's energy efficiency. So a future where we can do the things that we want to do while using a lot less of it. And regrettably, one cannot simply efficiently build your lifestyle such that you never need to generate electricity. That is always going to be necessary, no matter how good we get at energy efficiency. And we hear our customers telling us time and time again that whatever needs to be supplied to us has to be as clean as possible. So characteristic number 2 is whatever is supplied is as clean as possible. And characteristic number 3, which we are really hearing loud and clear now, is I never ever want to be interrupted. And I'm not talking about a bright sunny day where it's a little breezy outside, such as you're experiencing today, but I'm talking about the days when the hurricane comes through, when the superstorm comes through, when the 24 inches of wet snow comes through. So use as little as possible, make it as clean as possible, and as reliable as possible are the 3 messages we're working on satisfying for our customers.
So your job's getting easier, you're saying?
Every day. Yes, that's absolutely right.
Great. Well, let's start in the same place that I started with Gary in terms of from a end consumer perspective. What do you think has changed most in the past 5 years? And let's start, Tom, since you mentioned that EEI is having the National Accounts meeting this week. Let's start with C&I customers. What's changed most with C&I customers in the past few years?
Well, as I indicated with Advanced Customer Solutions, a lot more customized solutions for the bigger customers. Basically, everybody is still interested in the big 3, reliable, affordable, and increasingly clean, as Ralph mentioned. And again, you start with the clean power side of the equation. Companies like PSEG have gotten so much cleaner. The biggest addition to the generation side in the last several years has been renewables. Utilities own 2/3 of the solar in this country, and we represent just about all the wind. We've got nuclear energy, which Ralph has, that balance those intermittent sources and provides a zero carbon source of electricity. 2/3 of the electricity and zero carbon electricity in the country comes from nuclear energy, and we're moving to lower cost natural gas. So all those things are doing what all customers want, which is getting cleaner. The more modernized grid is enabling it all. We're doing $50 billion a year on the grid to make it kind of the internet of the electric system. And the smart grids are allowing customers to do energy efficiency a whole lot better. Again, to, on the operating side, introduce renewables, recover from storms and resilience, and those kinds of the equation. And on the individual side, Advanced Customer Solutions are breaking out all over this industry. I don't care whether or not it's customers that want renewables, we're giving it to them. Customers that want resilience, like the military, we're giving it to them. Customers that want to do more with energy efficiency or energy storage or microgrids, all those things are happening. But as Ralph says, in terms of the customers that have their electricity out, they just want it on real fast. So a major effort that we've had this last year is responding to hurricanes with Harvey and Irma and Maria and Puerto Rico and the Northeast, and where we bring people from all over the country to help restore power. Here in Texas was 10,000 folks we brought in. Southeast was 60,000, and Puerto Rico has been a real challenge, but we transported 5,000 people and major equipment across the ocean. So these are challenges the industry has. Cybersecurity is another big challenge that we're fighting right now. But we're using a lot of new technologies in all those areas, whether or not it be smart grids or drones or cyber tools and things like that.
I would definitely want to come back to both the resiliency question and the cybersecurity question as we get in the conversation. But to your point of the entire grid is getting cleaner, right? As we see the portfolio of resources changing, it's good for all customers. Right. But I'm curious for you, Ralph, in your service territory with PSEG, one of the trends we're seeing across the country, especially with the largest of customers who really are national accounts that have stores or facilities across multiple utility service territories, having the grid as a whole be clean isn't good enough for them, right? They want tangible projects associated. How are you responding to that?
We're a little bit of the skunk at the party on that subject. I hate to say it. So I've heard national directors of energy of large retail establishments who shall go nameless say, we want more of this. And I've kind of scratched my head and said, I don't, you're bricks, and I understand you're having a tough time competing against clicks. So how are you doing this? And the answer is through massive state and federal subsidies, which are paid for by the rest of my customers. Now, I then suggest to them, well, instead of doing it that way, why don't you just put a box in front of your store and say, please donate to our electric utility bill, and see whether or not you are able to finance your renewable infrastructure that way. And of course, everybody chuckles and says that's a really cynical thing to say. So we've invested almost $2 billion in solar. I can't sit still for more than 5 minutes without saying the words energy efficiency. So we really are, as a company, believe climate change is real and we need to do something about it. But I am not impressed by large commercial customers who say that they need to do this. I've heard them all talk about how they've put solar to power their data centers, and that's as close as you can get to a lie without explicitly lying. Because the last time I checked, the data center is a 24-hour operation, and they're not getting solar power 24 hours a day, and they're not putting batteries on that. So I think we have to introduce a little bit more candor in the discussion if we want this movement to be sustained over the long term. Because we're having a phenomenon in New Jersey right now where people thought, wow, this is great, the sun is free, let's do more of this. And then they turned around and found out that they were spending $600 million a year on solar renewable energy credits to get 3% of their electricity, above and beyond net metering and above and beyond the investment tax credits. And the industry wants to expand that, the rooftop industry. I was like, well, didn't you know this was happening? And the answer was no. I was like, well, we've been trying to tell you that. So there is this movement on the part of large commercial customers to do more. And I just think that we want to make sure that as we nurture this industry, which still needs nurturing, that we are more thoughtful about who's paying and how it's getting paid for, which is consistent with what Tom was saying about grid-connected versus some of the distributed installations that tend to be highly regressive in terms of who's paying for it. At any point in time, 18% of my customer receipts are beyond 30 days. And at any point in time, 7% of them are beyond 250 days. And New Jersey is the second highest per capita income state in the nation. That's not right, because there's a lot of people paying for that stuff.
So let's transition and talk more about residential customers. And I want to pick up, but continue with the theme. How do you educate customers about all of these issues? Because the industry is extremely complex.
Yeah.
How rates work, how costs are allocated is extremely complex. So as an individual, the CEO of an individual of a utility, and Tom representing many companies in the industry, what can utilities or should utilities be doing to make sure that customers have the information they need to then make an educated decision, both that's in their own interest, but also understanding the impact on the system and the whole society?
You need to have a third panel here, because we don't do it very well, because our customers are convinced that the sun is free. That we can't convince them that turning into electricity cost is expensive. We work mostly on our regulators and policymakers. We try to sit down, because look, I can't see because of the lights, but is everybody still awake? We're talking about electricity now for 10 minutes. I mean, and I know I would be asleep if I was.
They paid to come to electricity.
But I mean, I can't think of a more arcane and boring topic than utility regulation or grid infrastructure when talking to the average person. Think about when is the only time our industry is noticed?
The power goes out.
When the power goes out. And nobody's in a very good mood at that point in time, right? So the thought that this can be an engaging dialogue with our customers when you're worried about how are they doing at school, why is my spouse being a jerk, why is my boss being a bigger jerk, is a really tough sell. So we spend most of our time with policymakers and regulators trying to explain to them what it costs to do X versus Y and the value that may be produced if we did Z.
Tom, any additions to that based on?
No, I mean, I fully agree with what Ralph said earlier. You know, on the subsidies issue, once you put subsidies in, I think they're the hardest things to phase out. But I think that we are out there telling the industry story. As a matter of fact, we've even changed some of the language, which is very, very difficult to do in an industry to talk about, people are now talking about private solar, which is your solar rooftop as opposed to universal solar, which, as I said, the utilities build for all, and is less than half the price of private solar. So if you want solar, why wouldn't you err in that direction? admittedly, some customers will want their own solar rooftop. But I think that basically there is stories going out about how the industry is getting cleaner. We've reduced our emissions by 25% from 2005 levels. I don't know of any industry that's done that. That we're affordable, as Gary indicated. Sometimes you have trouble getting the customer's interest because it is so cheap and they don't really think that much about it. And they're learning a lot more about the grid and about the technologies that are going into the electric system, and expressing an interest to get involved in some of those technologies. So it is mainly through regulators and policymakers because they do take more time.
Yeah. So if a customer wants something, whether it's a residential customer or commercial customer, whatever the technology might be, if they want it, should the utility be able to provide it to them regardless of what side of the meter it's on?
No, you had me until you put that last phrase in there. Yeah,
Subtract that out.
Yeah.
Should the utility be able to provide it to them? Question mark.
So the answer is no, depending on the side of the meter it's on. Have I mentioned my fondness for energy efficiency yet? Yes. No, so I do believe that there are some reasons why, when it comes to energy efficiency, the investor in energy efficiency can be viewed either as rational or irrational. And what do I mean by that? If the investor in energy efficiency is the customer, it is quite rational for them to consider their opportunity cost. And I'll try to go through this quickly. I remember going around talking to some of our customers saying, why aren't you investing in energy efficiency more? So my target was hospital presidents. Okay. And I wanted to talk to them, so your building's been here for 20 years, 30 years. You got this disgusting HVAC boiler plant that you should replace tomorrow. So, and I'm full of energy and enthusiasm for why this person wasn't replacing his energy infrastructure. He said, Ralph, heaven forbid your kids needed a medical procedure that involved a stay at the hospital. Are you going to select that facility based upon the BTUs per square foot or the kilowatt hours per patient employed, or on something else? And of course, he was being polite, but I felt like a jerk, because I was being a jerk, because I thought that energy was the most important thing. He said, if I have $3 or $4 million of discretionary capital to spend, it's going into medical equipment and the facilities that will attract the finest doctors I can get.
But that's a short-term view, right?
Well, it is and it isn't, right? Because if he's going to sustain what he viewed as the fierce competition for populating his beds, he needs to do that. Same is true of major universities, major institutions that kind of aren't going anywhere. Now you apply that question to somebody who's renting an apartment or somebody who's buying a home and thinks that they're going to be there for 5 years, then they're not thinking about the 12-year payback on their water heating system. So I think that to the extent the market has some known reasons why it isn't going to supply a solution, then yes, the utility has an important role. And I think energy efficiency is a great example of that. But those aren't natural monopoly services. It's got to be society saying there's a structural impediment to the market doing this. But to the extent that the customer says, I want a smart thermostat, and they've made that decision and they've looked at their opportunity cost versus their cost of capital associated with that, they should go and buy it from Nest without having to bother with me. So who are the customers that we should be able to serve? Low income, public purpose, school system, government buildings. So that's why I gave you kind of a sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah. Tom, what do you think generally for your membership across the board? Where do you
well,
think
on the, yeah, I mean, it's different companies have different approaches, but I do think that for the Apples, Amazons, Walmarts, they say they want to go all renewable, so we have companies that are building solar farms for them in Alabama and Nevada and you name it, other places. The military, we just had a meeting at with our CEOs, with the heads of the assistant secretaries of the military, that their main mission is resilience. In case of an attack, they want to be able to say, hey, we can't afford to have the power back for our critical systems, so we've got a situation, and Tucson Electric is building a 155-acre solar facility on the base. So we serve 25% of the base. Same thing's happening in Hawaii. Same thing's happening again in Nevada and in Arizona with the Marine Air Force Base there. We've got electrification things going on. Georgia Power is electrifying the Port of Savannah. It's incredible. If you go there, you see these huge gantry cranes that are on all electric, and they're replacing diesel. And the environment's better, the noise is better, so it doesn't affect the neighborhood, and 85% less costly, so they're saving $10 million. Same thing at Hartsfield Atlanta Airport. So, you know, you've got apps coming in right now. AEP in Detroit have apps, Energy Bridge apps that tell their customers how their appliances are working, whether or not they're still working efficiently or not. You've got CenterPoint Energy doing an app for power alert service, so when the service is out, they are talking to their customers and vice versa. I mean, there's all kinds of new technologies that are coming in, and what's happening is the utilities are partnering with technology companies to deliver these to the customers and finding the things that you may not even know what the customer wants. But you offer these things up and they say, wow, this is terrific, we'll have them.
So how would you say overall, in terms of digital, the digital world, the theme of this conference for the utility industry, how well is the utility industry doing in terms of adopting these new digital resources that are available?
Yeah, so I think as soon as you mention the digital world, people immediately go to the customer, right? Because you know, this device that we carry around lets us do so many phenomenal things nowadays. That was my way of making sure it was off. That we just say, okay, we've got to be able to do more of that for our customer, and we do. But I do think that the area that has the greatest opportunity for the utility world is digitizing our side of the meter. Having just said a moment ago that I want to do stuff on the other side for certain classic customers. And I think that we still have a long way to go there. And whether it's diagnosing decay patterns in power plant performance, which operators tend to not be good at, right? Operators are looking at alarms. They're not looking at the fact that a pressure reading may be changing by fractions of a pound over the past 30 days, and yet if you trend that data, maybe you see something that otherwise you wouldn't see. And similarly on the grid, certain loss patterns that may not be obvious in the moment, but may be obvious over time. So I do think the digitization of our quote-unquote upstream infrastructure is an area that's ripe for benefits that will eventually translate.
What's been holding that back? Why hasn't it happened
look,
at the rate it should already?
You know, it's, oh gosh. You know, if Alexander, we talked about this at lunch, right? If Alexander Graham Bell somehow woke up, he would think he'd been dead for 1,000 years. Thomas Edison would think he had an afternoon nap. I mean, I have a picture in my office of Thomas Edison at a power plant that I'm still running. I mean, he christened it. But that's because the industry's hallmark has been reliability, and we've delivered that pretty well. So doing some of this kind of loopy stuff wasn't in our DNA to begin with, what we perceive to be strange stuff. So I think that's changing.
So tying a couple things together, are customers changing expectations of reliability and resiliency, potentially going to light the fire under the utility industry to make those changes?
I think the customer's expectations of having it cleaner and having it far more reliable than ever before is going to change that. Yes.
So the things that change any industry, technologies, public policies, and changing customers' expectations. And you've got all three of those things happening in this industry right now. And I do think that you know, you're seeing innovation, creativity, and things happening in the industry, whether or not it's in the energy efficiency area, on the customer side area, or more importantly, as Ralph said, on you know, from the actual operating systems of the utilities that are introducing all kinds of new technologies, and they're serving the customers better. Let me just name a couple. You know, again, if you want to look forward into the future, I want to have people think about what a city is going to be like 15 years from now. You know, it's going to be a lot different, hopefully. You know, you'll have more. And we've got a smart city initiative going with respect to, you know, and it's happening in cities like San Diego and Columbus and Charlotte, and I could go on and on. But basically, it's the mayors have approved this 100%, think this is great. We want more energy efficient lighting. We want to use those smart grids, where we're using about 25% of the capacity right now of the smart grids. Put sensors, cameras for safety, congestion management, EV charging stations, all kinds of things that it'll make the city safer, cleaner, and a better place to live. Electrification of cars and vehicles. I think that's 2017 was the year of the electric vehicle. When you saw it, we're up to 750,000 cars on the United States right now, many millions overseas. You saw a situation where the autonomous vehicles are driving change there.
We saw one driving in space. I mean, come on.
Right.
Yeah. Elon put one on Mars. And I think that basically overseas it's even faster. Where China and India are saying that they're going to ban the internal combustion engine, along with France and the UK and some of the Scandinavian countries. So it's going to be a whole lot different world, and it's going to be a lot of electricity and a lot of digital technologies will make that happen.
So what role should utilities be playing in the adoption and really advancing the adoption of electric vehicles?
We're driving it. We're out in front. We're making it happen. We're partnering with the automobile companies right now, and I think we're also working in the various states where we're driving the adoption.
This is a case where you do have to have public policy and regulation dovetail each other. So we've talked to people in our primary state of business, which is New Jersey, about the fact that yes, this is not a natural monopoly service, but you do have this chicken and egg, horse and carriage issue of do I buy the car absent the charging stations? Do I develop the charging stations absent the vehicles? So I think this is a great opportunity for utilities to build the infrastructure, and then when the market's ready to step in, you could force the divestiture of that infrastructure and allow whatever revenue stream comes in to offset the rate base that's gone into it. I do think utilities have a role in getting the industry going so that you can break this who should go first issue. That seems to be an issue, for at least in our part of the country.
Right. So I want to come back to the reliability and resiliency question now, but I also just want to give a heads up. We are going to take questions from the audience in a few minutes, so please start thinking about your own questions and preparing. So I think, Tom, you may have mentioned all of the storms that we've seen in 2017. What takeaways do you both have in terms of how those, well, first of all, the fact that there were that many storms, what does it mean for the industry going forward? Any major lessons learned from how those storms were handled that the industry should be thinking about?
Well, I'm very proud of our mutual assistance program. I don't know of any industry that brings people together to help other companies like we do in our industry, and it's come an awful long way since Hurricane Sandy, where we formed the government partnership to work together on this, on unity of operations and unity of message, and I think it's, again, been some Herculean stuff, but I think that basically we're looking to improve it all the time. We drill, we exercise, we use new technologies, so some of the lessons, the hardening and the investments that Ralph made and many other companies made in hardening their systems, which cost billions of dollars, is caused the hurricanes to do less damage than they did before.
We saw that in Florida, right?
The smart grids in Florida was a big time, absolutely, Julie, and then the smart grids allow you to get that threat assessment done a whole lot faster. You don't have to send trucks out to find out what's going on. You're finding it by the digital technologies, and drones help you do that kind of thing too. And so we're deploying all the different kinds of operations and technologies that are helping us do a lot better. On the cyber area, we're working with a government partnership we use cyber risk information sharing technology that is a detection technology, understanding that you're not ever going to prevent all the attacks in the future, as we've seen lately. And we're working together on information sharing and analysis, and again, on exercises and drills that are helping us continually learn how to get better and recover.
So this is, I think, one of the more fascinating sides of the industry from the point of view of customer expectations and kind of breaking the old regulatory mindset. It may be a sign of my ignorance, but I am hard-pressed to think of another product or service that we use today, we collective, all of us in this room, where we're using less of it, but we're more dependent on it. And that is true of electricity. And people are no longer satisfied, customers are no longer satisfied with multiple day restoration times after major storm events. And that does involve a significant hardening of the infrastructure. We have pumped billions of dollars into that. Tom talked about the fabulous work the industry does, and I do think that's a source of pride for all of us in helping each other in the moment. But it's the capital programs that go on every day to help harden the system. But we have a traditional regulatory system that's volume-based. So as people are using fewer kilowatt hours, and we are putting a lot more money into the infrastructure, right? So the numerator is the money we're putting in, the denominator is the amount of kilowatt hours people are using. That ratio is getting bigger, and that understandably frightens regulators. But trying to demonstrate that no, electricity may be getting used less, but its value is so much more, because I mean, I can't brush my teeth at home without electricity, right? I've got this little stub of a toothbrush that I got to plug into an electric powered device. So, and again, at the risk of repeating myself, the only time people recognize the value of electricity is when they don't have it, and that's not the time to say to them, see, you should have let us pass higher rates on to you, because you really miss it now. So there has to be a meeting of minds on the value of electricity as opposed to the cost of electricity.
Tom, how does Washington factor in? There's lots of talk in DC about infrastructure. Is the electric infrastructure part of that conversation?
Well, I think the electric infrastructure is definitely part of the conversation. Washington, I always describe as 20 square miles surrounded on all four sides by reality. So who knows what they'll get done from here? But from the utility standpoint, we always say we don't really need government money. That's the big question on a major infrastructure legislation: where does the money come from? We have a low cost of capital. We can deploy that capital to build infrastructure if the regulators approve that. And so I think that the kinds of technology we're talking about, we can deploy those. What really would help in an infrastructure legislation, if we can again team up with mayors and communities on smart cities and smart communities, and work with those organizations that may not have the same kind of capital to do these things. That's the kind of thing we're looking for in the infrastructure package.
Great. So I'm going to come to the audience after this next question, so be ready. So this was not on our pre-plans in terms of discussion, but at lunch we were talking about the diversity of the industry, and I actually thought that would be a great conversation to have with the audience here. So talk to us a little bit, how have you seen the industry's diversity change? Where is it doing well? Where does it need to be doing better? What tactical things should we be doing to make changes?
Well, you go ahead.
Well, look, the reality is that every business needs to become far more diverse than it was in the past, as we have shifting demographics, right? Why anyone would want to limit themselves to something less than 100% of the available labor pool, supplier pool, is just sort of ludicrous from the point of view of running a healthy business. I know we do better with gender diversity than we do with racial or ethnic diversity. We've tried to broadly define diversity because we have a fairly large non-US ownership of our stock. So ESG in writ large is a big topic. So we've talked about diversity of thought. But the reality is, when you think about how the utility industry has grown up, right? So if I move somebody from one part of my service territory and assign them to another part of service territory, you would think we launched them into a different galaxy, right? I mean, the resistance that we get. So 1/3 of our employees are related to each other. 1/3, right? It's hard to get diversity when you're hiring your nephew and your niece. That's not so different from other companies in the industry. So, and I love to hire from within. I think that motivates people. It really, but how do you do that? You can't. That's a 3-part puzzle where the 3 pieces don't fit together. A lot of family members, a lot of hiring from within, and then changing the face of the company. So we are just going to non-traditional locations to recruit people. So we're getting better at it. If you look at my last 5 years of engineering recruits, it's beautiful.
So when you say non-traditional places to recruit,
so we go to different colleges. We don't go to the same colleges that every engineer we've had before got hired. When I became president of PSEG, so before I became the parent company president, I literally had a prominent legislator say to me, "You're not Irish and you didn't go to Lehigh." But that was, if you look back,
how did you get this job?
How'd you get this job? Right? And that's not a knock on Lehigh. It's a great, and I mean that sincerely, it's a great institution. Nor is it a knock against Irish, but now, unfortunately...
You just didn't fit. You didn't fit the profile, yeah.
But now I know Tom's going to make fun of me because my number 2's name is Ralph, so we've got a different diversity challenge going on here. So I think we're making progress, and Tom's going to tell you some great news about the industry on the gender side, but in particular in nuclear, we need to do better.
Yeah, I think, utilities need to represent the communities that they serve, and so diversity is a major initiative, as you know, of our current chairman, Pat Benson-Klon, who is our first female chairman and is going to be on the program tomorrow. And I am proud of the fact that now we have a higher percentage of women CEOs than any other industry in the country. But I think in other areas we're not doing as well, but I think that, again, it's got to work its way up throughout the organization, and then we'll make it to the CEO level. So we've got a major initiative to make that happen.
Great. Well, I know everybody here supports that and looks forward to doing whatever we can to help. Okay, let's go ahead and turn to the audience. I assume that there is a mic floating. Yes, over here. Okay. And if you could, whoever's going to have the first question, if you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Okay, I guess I'll go without a microphone. So I'm Eric Orostia, I'm with ADL Ventures, and I have a question for Dr. Izzo, actually. I thought that you were very perceptive and some of the ideas that you have for how you can improve the upstream operation using technology. And then you give us a really good sense of why some of these innovations haven't happened. You talked about the legacy, holding reliability that drives a lot of capabilities within the organization. You talked about what customers want, the very basic things that they want, the regulatory requirements that you have. You talked about, to some extent, the vendor community, and how they end up basically catering to those needs, because bringing you things that solve problems that you don't really have. So my question is, to what extent does... Is this better?
Just in time for the question.
You're pretty good.
Yep.
To what extent does fear of uncertainty drive the reticence to take steps? And by that I mean fear of failure. So if something doesn't work, but also fear of success, in terms of how success could transform your business in ways that you don't yet understand. And why, many Ralph Izzos wouldn't come and basically try to throw all of their talent at solving all of the problems they can find, including the engineering staff.
Yeah, regrettably, we have such a long list of failures that I don't think anybody could suggest that we've had a fear of them. No, I really think that our biggest challenge is making sure that the regulators see the same things we do. And I know your prior speaker said, let's stop blaming the regulators, and I'm whining long enough, but I can't tell you how long we've been banging the drum on energy efficiency as a way to stimulate the technology industry. I mean, I'm sure there are tools and ways that we can get customers to save energy that I can't even begin to fathom. So instead, I focus on just changing their water heaters and their boilers, because I know that people understand that technology and there's plenty to be done there, and changing their light bulbs, right? Some very, very non-techy stuff. But I don't think we have any fear of failure or fear of success in making this. What we consistently run into is a regulatory system that says we've never done that before, and we don't, the market will provide that. And I can remember Jimmy Carter sitting in front of the fireplace with the patches on his sleeve saying we need to be more energy efficient. Here we are still. We are the absolute gluttons of the world when it comes to energy consumption per capita, and there's so much more and so much better that we can do. So that may not be true across the industry, but I can tell you in my case, I'm not worried about that at all. If I can get a regulator to let me go, we would go.
I hate to piggyback on Ralph's answer, but earlier he brought up the issue of rate design. Again, I don't know any industry where you try and recover the fixed costs through volumetric charges. So if you want to do energy efficiency more, that's kind of insane. I think that it is very, very important for a very important initiative for us to get the regulators to change off that 100-year model and to change that idea. Yes, you've got to change cultures, and you've got to make sure people that are innovative and are in your culture and want to take risks. But I think that's happening, and I see every CEO committed to it. So I think you're going to see more and more partnering with technology companies, more and more focus on the customer.
All right, I think we have time for probably one more question.
It's always the best way to make sure there are no more questions when you answer just one more
Say
question.
it's the last one. It's got to be a good one. Don't ask it if it's not good. Yeah, please. There's a microphone coming on its way.
I just have a short question, and that is, how do you manage your business in a declining, or a flat at best, or declining market for electricity? How does that impact your business?
So unfortunately, recognize that the basic structure of the regulated utility industry is that the more used and useful assets you put into service, the more your earnings go up. So for us, declining volumetric demands are completely irrelevant from the point of view of if we need to put in a stronger infrastructure to be resilient or a different infrastructure to reflect shifting population patterns, our earnings are going to go up. Now, what we have to manage, to your point, is explain to the regulators why the rate needs to increase. And it's because we put so many more dollars in and we had so many fewer kilowatt hours being used. I wish I'd done that before. I can block the light. And so now the rate is higher than it was. We have the benefit of that PSEG. So we have literally, over the past 10 years that I've been CEO, tripled the earnings of our company. We have grown the earnings in the last 5 years at a compound annual rate of 13%. Here's the punchline. And our customer bill is 24% lower than it was 10 years ago. Now that's a totally charlatan thing to say to you because I'm implying that I deserve credit for that. The reality is natural gas prices went from $8 and $10 an MMBTU to $2 an MMBTU, and that PSEG, underline G, has resulted in a much lower customer bill. But what we've said to the regulators, and in all seriousness, I shouldn't joke as much as I do, we've said, look, if you're not going to replace this aging infrastructure, when real interest rates are at an all-time low, when bills are coming down, when capital is available to us, when will you ever do it? And to the credit of the New Jersey and the federal regulator, because we're half regulated by FERC on transmission and half regulated by New Jersey on distribution, and with the help of Superstorm Sandy, they basically said, you're right, go for it, do it now. So most of our attention has been on the infrastructure, and notwithstanding the higher rate, because the distribution rate has gone up, the bill has come down because of the supply piece. And in fairness to our regulators, to the first question where they have not been willing to let us go on energy efficiency, I think we've given them so much to think about on the grid that maybe they haven't had a chance to fully absorb what can be done on energy efficiency.
Tom, have other utilities, have they been as fortunate as PSEG has been?
Maybe not as smart as Ralph, but I think that basically, what you have is seen a major capital expenditures on grid modernization. At the same time, rates have gone up lower than the rate of inflation, and electricity is still a huge bargain. So to the extent that we do invest in a much smarter, more modernized grid, I think it will give us all kinds of opportunities in the future to better serve the customer. Great. Well, we're going to, on that last word, customer, we will end it there. Please join me in thanking Tom and Ralph. Thank you.